I'd like to first invite Mr. Awais bin Naseem, the Managing Director at Tetra Pak Pakistan Limited. Awais has been the leading person. Thank you so much. I still want to go through his whole introduction. Please bear with me. Thank you so much. Alright, so Mr. Awais has been the leading person in operations, business development, and organization development. Please be seated. Please take your seats down. I'm sorry, I have to continue with the introduction, but I'd rather he has a seat, okay? Thank you. Okay, so he's been the leading person in operations, business development, and organization development with a wide range of experience in various sectors, mainly food packaging, petrochemical, and agriculture sectors, spending over 27 years. He has been the key member of leading business model teams for service operations in Tetra Pak with 3 successful waves of organizational design and optimization across the global organization. And now the panel. I'd like to now take the opportunity to invite Mr. Samir Hayat, the Chief Executive Officer at Dabal Tea Private Limited, who has been leading Pakistan's largest tea company successfully for consecutive years of extraordinary growth despite the country's tough macro environment. Prior to joining Dabal, Mr. Samir has spent over 20 years with Procter & Gamble based in Saudi Arabia, Switzerland and Dubai, leading global brands such as Pampers, Gillette, Head & Shoulders and Pantene for Middle East, Africa, India and Pakistan.
Thank you so much, sir, for being here and having us and joining us on the CEO panel for performance management. Just to set the context on why we decided to have a panel on performance management, I spoke a little bit about in context to employee experience. As we think about the entire context of employee experience, you can say that the manager-employee relationship is a crux of that, right? I would say conservatively 50% of what an employee feels is driven by that relationship, right? And again, research has shown us in the last 30 years, at any given point in time, 2 out of 3 companies are always looking to restructure their performance management system. So something is not right, something has not been working. We have feedback, research that employees are not happy with that relationship, right? And they continue to struggle in terms of building relationships and trust with the managers. So we thought that let's get our leaders here and get their thoughts on what their experience has been and get insights from them. So I'll start with the first question and appreciate any insights and feedback from them. Your perspective, given the unhappiness with the context of performance management, what does your experience say on this topic, and if you agree or not? Maybe to start with Samar.
Okay. Okay, so first of all, I think just to kind of set the context of this, I wasn't quite aware that there's such a dire kind of situation with performance management. I think it's more, from my perspective, it's more of an evolving part of how the business and the organization is built. I think from what I've seen, obviously some of the issues which are pretty self-explanatory are, again, this is just my observation, right? I think differentiation is often talked about, but perhaps not practiced well enough. And I'm talking about differentiation in terms of evaluating performance and then rewarding performance, right? So, and obviously for obvious reasons, it's hard. It's hard because it upsets a lot of people, right? It's very hard to internalize sometimes for people performance outcome, and then usually there's a lot of conspiracy theory that gets built around this in companies, right? So, and Pakistan gets dramatized a bit because of perceptions around company politics and stuff just gets built up in people's heads. So I think a lot of time the differentiation on performance evaluation and then linked to that differentiation on reward system is probably sugar-coated or not explained properly, etc., and that leads to a lot of confusion. Now, it seems to be a widespread issue. So I think my one perspective on this is I think the clearer the differentiation system is set up and explained, and then the clearer the reward system.
Take a step back, what just someone mentioned. In Pakistan, what I have seen in my 26, 27 years experience in the private sector, in the corporate sector, when you sit down, that needs to be there, that you need
To explain what this whole process is about, how do you relate the compensation and the reward with performance and all. 95% of the employees, when they come to me, when I was the team leader and still, oh sir, I'll make them whatever you want. 95% of the employees still do that. They do not own the process, even if they understand it. They just want to be the victims, nothing else. That is a big part of it. Now, how to get rid of that part? It's not that they have to take the ownership, and that ownership actually has to be transpired from the line manager, because he has to go out and explain to him, because giving feedback is not easy. Being a line, everybody wants to be a manager, everybody wants to be a director, but they do not want to fulfill the responsibilities which come with it. They leave it to the bad guy, which is the HR, that you take everything, you take, and HR in the process becomes the hitman, that okay fine, they become the owner of the process. At times they start enjoying it as well, which is not a good thing, but most of the times we have to understand as the business owners or the heads of the management of the company that HR is the custodian of the process, not the owner of the process. The owner is the business, the line manager and the employees. So if employee does not use that tool, if he does not know the power of that tool, we will be in this problem day in, day out. One of the organization, I'm not, I think, no harm in taking the name, organization which I experienced when I joined in Ingro, 1996, after lunch. I think I was baffled by, because before that I was in a Pakistani company, Bali Polyester, and there the HR was like, it was like the hitman of the state, okay fine, this is what we'll do, and everybody was scared of the HR manager and director. When I joined Ingro, the whole perspective, the pain it took for the employee to make him understand his power, and this was done by HR, and it was amazing. Most of the other companies I've seen, they take it as a static process at the start of the year, fill in the IOs, and then that is closed there, and then at the year end it opens, oh, you did this, this, this. This is what performance, this is not performance management. This leads to the problem, and it needs to be actively shared by the employee and the line manager both. So we are not willing to take that responsibility. If we take the responsibility, things will be easier. But what someone said, the problem is still there, but it will become easier. I think if I can summarize the feedback, so we've got obviously the side which is the employee and manager both taking responsibility, but equally one of the problems, and very rightly someone pointed out that the reward differentiation generally just does not exist, and managers are very hard, they don't have the guts to have the strong conversations around reward differentiation. I'll share one insight with you. Aon Hewitt conducted a survey last year, and they divided reasonably well-doing companies to hyper-growth performing companies. And of the 4 things that hyper-growth companies do really well is performance differentiation. So obviously there is a reason why they do well. It's hard discussions, but there is a reason why they do so well. I'll move on to the next question, which is, how did COVID impact sort of, whatever framework you have? Did you have to tweak anything? And has that, sort of changed, continued going forward? Or are you going back to normal? No, I think COVID, I think for some of the things, it probably came at the right time in order to see that how, because the changes in the lifestyles and all that, the sustainability element, making people realize that things need to be different in order to go on. When it comes to performance management, I think we at Tetra Pak, we had actually a pretty good head start on this one, because we had regional roles. I was doing work from or remote work since 2014 in Tetra Pak. So that's how it goes. And we have seen that this performance management system, actually, you start living it, that you want the performance. You don't want that the person should be there, clocking in, day out, okay, and then, so it has given that flexibility, and that flexibility in the eyes of the line manager has become very important, because the old school was that you have to be present in office from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5.
But now with this new COVID thing, performance management is one of the things which has actually, now when you're remote, the employee also has to understand that, and they did understand that they have to be more productive, more collaborative, because sitting alone is not helping anyone get to them. So you have to be stepping out of your comfort zone of showing that flexibility, that collaborative engagement. So that, for us, it has helped. I don't know what Summer's experience is on this.
Yeah, no, I think, so first of all, obviously a phenomenal event happened, right, globally. From our side, first in terms of things we did, etc., we did very similar to what a lot of companies did. So obviously work from home, prioritizing employee safety and well-being. We did an announcement very early on, I think it was just, maybe the second week. We came out with an announcement, I put out a video saying we will guarantee, no layoffs during COVID time. I mean, if now we've kind of forgotten it, but at that time it looked like the world will come to an end, and God knows what will happen, etc. Luckily, we were also in an essential sector, which is food and beverages, so we had to keep the factory running, and therefore, we did a lot of the right steps that I think a lot of companies did, and we also did them, and made sure we did the other stuff like the ration bags for our factory workers, because even if the factory worker's job was safe, he had a relative at home, or a father or a brother who had lost their job or were laid off. So we went through all those steps that were the right steps, I think, to ensure that we keep our employee base secure, motivated still, and also eliminate the fear that had kind of kicked in as COVID hit. But I think beyond that, those were all kind of the right mechanical steps that we took. I think beyond that, this other stuff, I think that exactly the right points, which is, work from home, which a few years ago, I think people would have probably laughed at or been skeptical about. All of a sudden has become a part of our lives. Other stuff also has started to happen, right? Which is travel changed dramatically for us. So, if I go back to my days, I used to be in a regional role, and I used to travel 15 to 18 days a month all over Africa. And now that I think back on those trips, perhaps 30 to 40% of those trips were a complete waste of resources, right? But we just did it because everybody was doing it. So I think some logic started to show up in terms of how people commute, and I think again that is a huge link also to how the organization then works, right? So I think these are all obvious things. I think the one insight I think that to me was quite revolutionary out of this whole thing was that through the toughest times and the most uncertain times, if we communicate and communicate and communicate, we can overcome a lot of things that sometimes feel like impossible things. So now we moved our leadership team meeting to twice a week instead of once a week. There's no, we could have managed still with once a week, but we just wanted to make sure we are always talking to each other as a leadership team. We encourage, daily calls between online and etc. between the team members. And so I think my one biggest insight was, and it'll, who knows when the next crisis, shows up, is we have to, do a overdose and then overdose that on communication. Right, and I think that was to me a really revolutionary insight. We'll use that, I think, for the future as well, at least for us.
That was actually my next question. That the new age performance management, the few conversations I've been part of, a lot of companies are now focusing on, double tapping on conversation. So if you think about it, you mentioned earlier, and you mentioned as well, the ownership at the manager level, taking ownership. There are some companies who are now mandating, including the one I worked last. You have to talk to your employee once a week. If you've got 15 direct reports, you must talk to them once every 2 weeks. It's mandated. And that's the new age performance management. On top, and we'll talk about this at the end of the day, companies are spending a lot of money training managers to be better coaches. Because ultimately you hire people, you don't hire them to direct, you want to coach them because you assume that they have the skill set. Are you thinking along the same lines, and what are your thoughts on this phenomenon?
We are exactly actually doing the same thing. Our performance management system over the last 5 years has changed dramatically. It's an ongoing discussion. You do not close it. You can have 365 discussions a year, on that performance management, because with these dynamic situation changing, you need to change the objective as well. So you need to keep it up, and that is an excuse. It's not mandatory, but again, this is what the part is coming from, that you have to develop or train the employees. So we have got so many e-trainings, over communication of the staff that, okay, fine, this is what you need to do, this is what the time is. So all these things are related now. We are focusing on that part, that give that flexibility to the line manager and to the employee, that if employee, you set an objective, okay, fine, day one, on year one. Now, 2 months later, the whole scene changed. You can't wait for 10 months to come and then say, go back, or what are you going to be doing for the next 10 months, because that item has gone out of the window now. Objective. So you go back, open the tool, sit down with the employee, say this is what it is. So it has to be dynamic, and those what we are doing. The difficult part, I think, is that training and coaching, because you have to remember that with the new generation which is coming up, they are more of their, their work style is freelancing. With the remote control, with the remote support, with the remote working, and with the work from home and all the timings, if you look at that, it's a lot sort of a freelance approach. You cannot curtail them into 9 to 5 framework. So now, from 5 years from now, when these guys will become line managers, would they be able to coach other people, or what will they coach? So these are the dilemmas which the organizations are facing, that, okay, fine, it seems very nice that you can handle today, but when those people come into action as line managers, how are they gonna maintain that organization cultures? Because this is where I think most of the companies are now concerned, that what is the culture gonna be with the remote working? You have to link it somehow with the performance. That is one tool which you will have to showcase your culture, that we reward remote performances, good performances, dynamic performances. So it's not an easy task going forward from here, but companies, I think a lot of companies which I talk to also are taking a step in the right direction, but it's going to be a slow process.
Yeah, I think again the cliche or the obvious thing to say is that, of course, there needs to be significant emphasis on manager to employee direct coaching. I think you made a great point earlier that HR is, in my opinion, a facilitator / custodian of the training coaching framework. But somehow it's very funny. Even in today's day and age, you run into a discussion sometimes where people are like, "But HR hasn't given a training, or HR hasn't." So and the obvious answer to that is what we say, which is you can take the horse to the water, but you can't make so there has to be indeed an awakening to a large extent. I think in Pakistan that the ultimate responsibility is the managers, and that goes without saying. I think on the communication between manager and employee, there are some amazing, very very early on in my career, I was in a training, and one of our senior leaders, a guy called Jim Lafferty, now runs a big company in the Middle East. He was at Procter & Gamble, so he gave us an incredible insight which I held on to for the rest of my career, where he said, look, when I was very young, and I became a manager, and I had this person working with me in Cincinnati, and wasn't doing too well. So at the end of the year, I sat with the person and I said, look, you've been missing these goals, and it hasn't gone well. And he was narrating his incident. He said, this person looked at me and said, if I could, I can't. If I could, I'd slap you. And they're like, what do you mean? This is ridiculous. I said, well, because why did you have to wait the whole year, right? If you had told me 4 months into it, 3 months into it, I could have done something about it. Now my rating is set, and now my career is gone. And he said, this left me so shaken up. And so he told us that, and I remember this story very well still, 20 years on, because this is the crux of it, right? If you are seeing performance challenges and you're not communicating about it, you are doing a terrible disservice to the person and to the ecosystem around the person, because there are also other people that are suffering due to that performance. So I think this point about, do we mandate it to once a week, once a day, once in 6 months? I don't know. Different people have different answers to this. But I think ultimately the test lies in, is the employee surprised by the feedback? If they're surprised by the feedback, then there's an issue. Right? There's a clear issue. If the feedback is understood as, well, I was getting the coaching along the way, and I haven't been able to deliver, and people will still probably be in denial, but at least somewhere in subconscious there is this reality check, right? So I think that to me is the ultimate test, and that's what we try to use as well at our end, which is are we when we're sitting at the end of the year for the final assessments, etc. Is any part of that coming as a surprise to the employee? And if it is, then we have failed. I think as a leadership team, as a management system, as a performance management system, all of that. So that's my point.
Thank you, very fair point. I've got a few questions, but I'll open up to the audience if there are any questions from the audience for our leaders.
Just a very quick two short questions. In your sense, there's a lot of exposure and experience sitting on the stage, at least of 6 companies, local and international. Do you know about an organization which have done their scoring system on a monthly basis? Because we all have discussed there's a recency effect, but the ratings are almost always on the yearly basis or half-yearly basis. Max at quarter. Don't you think when you are reviewing the objectives, as the way staff was saying, for 365 days, there can be a monthly scoring system, there can be a monthly objectives progress system? Any comment on that? That's one. Number 2, someone talked about the feedback. People don't, since I'm a corporate trainer also, so people in my training sessions, people say we don't give feedback. The hidden mentality is, number 1, they don't have time to do that. So they give preference to the business objectives. So have we put in our senior leadership teams appraisal system that they need to be coaches? Is that a KPI? I don't think so. There is a coach KPI for them, because if it's not there, then the business results will always take precedence. As Simon Sinek always says, right? Leaders are not responsible for results. Leaders are responsible for people who are responsible for results. Please just short your comments on these 2 things.
Thank you so
I
much.
can start with the scoring system. This is what the whole purpose is, that there are certain objectives. Let's say, like, I'll take a very practical example. For sales, it's the sales target. So now if you have got a sales target of X number of rupees or X number of whatever it is, then you break it down into steps. You see, you can do it on a weekly basis as well, because you know how it will evolve. And this is what I have at least seen in my life, and happened to me as well, because when I came into this role, into the regional role, my boss, the senior vice president of Petromac, he used to ask me on every fortnightly basis that where are we on dash? We have got our dashboard. So it was a 15-minute session planned. But then I thought, should I do it with my team or no? It might be an overkill. But then I realized, no, you have to do it in order to see where are we. It's not about the policing. It's how you deal with it. It's how you want to see that this is an opportunity for you to adjust or see or whatever, or tell the problem what you are facing. Because most of the employees take it as a policing as well. So we had to, actually, in a lot of cultures, we had to retract it to, okay, fine. In Africa, West Africa, they said, oh, you are going to be now the policeman of this, or what? Every 2 weeks I have to tell you what I'm doing. I will take you after every quarter or 6 months. So, but that still, so there could be clash of culture as well, but nothing stops you from doing it. And it is, the scoring is not the objective. The objective is to give the feedback, the right feedback. And giving that right feedback always takes the line manager's responsibility. Analyze the situation. We need to spend time on that. And unfortunately, what I have experienced that very few people, line managers, also take the time required to do the process fully. So once you do that, and once the company's job, HR job is to facilitate that. So once that is done, the coaching is done, then this process becomes very nice and it actually smoothens up a lot. So you can make it a part of scoring, but scoring is not the objective. The objective is interaction, the engagement with the employee, to give the feedback. If he's not doing it, coming back to someone's point, sorry for the long answer, everybody in this country thinks he's a cheetah, she's the best employee, which is a gift to the mankind. And a lot of times, nobody has had the guts or the courage to tell him or otherwise, yes, you are best in these 2 or 3 things, but these 3 things also need focus. We don't balance, we don't know how to give feedback as well. Either we just slap it on, or we bring it on, or head on, or we just try to, you have to be sort of, how would you call it? And multinational, there is now another D&I and all that stuff. You have to be inclusive and all that stuff. So you have to be careful. You have to give the feedback, timely feedback. Otherwise, the whole process goes haywire. Does that answer your question? Because the first part, second part, I leave to someone.
Yeah, look, I think, just on this, obviously, if you are a very senior leader in any company, you're running a department or running a function, and I think you're unable to do people development and coaching, etc., then I think I think you're absolutely not qualified for that role. By the time you make it to a position where you have your manager of people who are managing others. So I think to answer your question, should coach KPIs? Should coaching be a KPI? Absolutely. I think it should be, and I think ability to lead people and develop people is a critical KPI for how people should be assessed. I think just a second on the first point as well from my side. I think tracking of business results is different than assessment of business outcome, right? So I think constant tracking of how the business is doing, we all do it. We do it weekly, we do it daily, we have blah, blah. Everybody has their own system to do that. I think the balance in assessment of the final assessment of how the person has delivered and over-delivered or under-delivered, etc. The balance, I think, somewhere is, I'm not sure about a monthly or a quarterly, etc. But the balance is in letting, and I think the point was correct, which is letting people also have trust and giving them space and time to go deliver the results, right? So I think I'm a bit old school in this, which is as long as the objectives are clear, the infrastructure is there for people to deliver, the framework is there, then I think you've got to let people, give them ample amount of time to come back and then do an assessment of whether that was done or not. So I know the startup culture is like, there's like a hourly assessment, it seems, right? So it's a different world perhaps now, but I've always believed in the older school thinking of, you need to give people time, give them trust, accountability of course comes, and then you assess at the end. That's my point.
One comment on that, I think it's an insight which helped me a lot, and I've asked always my team wherever the regional, I've asked them to do that. You should read it's a book by Marshall Goldsmith, What Got You Here Will Not Get You There. That book, the title itself says, a very successful person who has done as, let's say, like an area manager, sales job, might not be the best sales manager or national sales manager, because he will have to undo a lot of things which he made him successful at that level, but not at the next level. So if you read that book, it helps you in identifying your coaching requirement as a line manager, that how you have to develop your employees well. You have to tell them what got you here will not get you there. I think it's just a piece of advice. If you can find to read that book, beautiful book. Marshall Goldsmith, What Got You Here Will Not Get You There.
We have a workshop designed on that book.
Thank you. My name is Arzu Mahmood and I represent Habib Metro Bank Human Resources. I'm the head of HR Relationship Management. I'll give a little bit of context because my question needs it, and I would need your perspective because it's a cross-industry perspective which will help us. We're working on enhancing the gender diversity in banking industry, right? Everybody knows that, and that's a big challenge for bankers these days. So the question is, well, the fact is that a huge population of banking cannot work from home or work remotely. We know that, right? Brick and mortar still play a vital role in service industry, so we have to have people who serve people. So whatever the percentage is, for example, if there's 5% people working from home, how do we establish or set up a mechanism to reward? We were talking about dynamic KPIs, and we were talking about how to reward the remote people working from remote areas or remote places. How do you reward? One, if we hire females who can work from home, or people who've left us or want to rejoin banking, how do we encourage them? Because hum unko sara din ke liye, we cannot engage them for the whole day, right? So if we give them flexi hour kind of a thing to work through and work from home, how do we reward them, and how do we satisfy the 95% of the population that we're not doing injustice to them? And how do we make sure that we're being fair? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, I don't know what the exact scientific answer would be, but I can give you my point of view on this. I think sometimes we get tangled up in a lot of the stuff that sits between results, right, and us, right? And let me give you an example, right? If the only thing that mattered along with organization development is business results, and if you take off the table this entire conversation of where somebody is, what hours they were working, were they asleep during a video call, with the camera off, right? If you take all of this off the table, right, and you say none of this matters, location doesn't matter, time doesn't matter, right? Results matter. And if we say that with that in mind, the empowerment of the how part is with the employee, right, or with the department, I think things might change, right? And I'll tell you my personal learning on this, right? Many years ago, before WhatsApp and phones and et cetera, right? I was located in a regional job with a boss who was in the same city, in the same office. And in the 2.5 years or so that I reported to this person, and again, go back to the time that this was, there was no, except for calling someone, there was no way. I mean, the video calls were also very rare. That shows you how old I am. But so there was, in those 2.5 years that I worked for this person, I cannot remember a single time this person ever asked me where I was. Again, now it's easier to think about this, but back then it was very real, right? There was a lot of meetings. So if he ever needed to talk to me, he'd look around, he couldn't find me, just call him. And when he'd call me, it would never start with where are you? Never, right? It would always be, this is the discussion, this is the business, okay, thank you, everything okay, thank you, bye, right? Over time, I started to realize there is so much empowerment and so much trust that the only thing that matters is whether the business is doing well or not doing well. And if the business wasn't doing well, frankly, it wouldn't have mattered if I was in the office all day or not. There would be bigger troubles, right? So I'm just saying, perhaps a lot of this stuff sits in our heads, right? In companies and in HR and in top leadership, etc. But if in reality, if you just think about it, and if you just completely remove it as a discussion item, maybe you try it as an experiment, right? Which is for a couple of months, completely remove this discussion. Who cares what time anybody comes in or what time they leave? Who cares where they sit? Who cares, about a lot of these things, if the business results are very, very good. But if the business results are not very good, then what difference does it make whether they were sitting in the office all day and they were connected to all the video calls and they were, man or woman? What difference does it make? What difference does any of it make? Right? So there is that. I mean, that's my point of view. Maybe it's a bit kind of radical, but really that's how I process a lot of the conversations when I'm having conversations with people on issues. Which is there's a lot of stuff in the middle that's just details and process, right? If the business is doing well or not doing well, somehow becomes a bigger topic. So anyway, that's just my point of view. But please.
I think what we also asked about the D&I part, diversity, inclusion, the gender balance and all. I think it's something which we have started consciously looking at as an industry as well, that we see that diversity always has its benefits. And because your question was pretty loaded one, actually, there were like a lot of dimensions to it. And the other dimension of back office work, what sort of work would we give the woman as well that in the back office? I think what we've seen that the frontline service industry, you have to be present for the customer as well. But if you look at how the service industry has evolved back in USA or Europe, nobody goes to the bank anymore. Alas, those days are over. The call centers are in Asia for all the banks. So I think it also depends on the business model which the bank wants to, or the company organization which wants to follow. I can give you an example of Tetra Pak, where we have hubs of the functions which can be in the back office. Pakistan is one of the hub locations because of cost attractiveness. So there are people who don't show up in office for almost a year because they've got nothing to do with the local market company. So they're like doing job for other markets, other areas. So it all depends on what we had thought or what the wish was, that okay, if we could evolve, as someone was saying that 20 years ago, 5 years ago, the boss never asked him, and we now, so we also thought 5 years ago it would be so good to have work from home. Now this is happening. So things will evolve and we will get there actually. But it's a journey, it's not going to happen overnight. Nobody can dictate the pace of it. That's what I think your concern would be, which is very difficult from industry to industry as well. Might be different for banking, might be different for manufacturing, might be different for consultancy. So it all depends, it will have its fallout on different industries, but eventually we will all be moving in that direction. Because the scary part is where now the research says the new generation, they don't even want a job, they don't want a house, they don't want a car, so they just want their laptop. The investment they are doing is on their techie stuff. So let's see where the future takes us. It's going to be a scary part, but we can't predict really.
We have one more question before we are. Please.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Ashif Javed. I am from Untitled Chapter. I am heading PMS and reward side. My question is, हम लोगों ने अभी objective setting का proper mechanism develop किया. पिछले 2 साल से हम उससे ट्रेनिंग भी करवा रहे हैं, कोचिंग भी करवा रहे हैं, और वो प्रॉपर कैस्केड हो जाते हैं. ऑब्जेक्टिव बिजनेस के ऑब्जेक्टिव हैं, देन दैट गोज टू डिपार्टमेंट लेवल एंड देन सो ऑन यूनिट लेवल, सेक्शन लेवल एंड टीम लेवल. प्रॉपर सारा साल इसके ऊपर हमारे कॉन्टीन्यूस डिस्कशन सेशंस भी होते हैं, डेवलपमेंट नीड्स की आइडेंटिफाई होती हैं, ट्रेनिंग सेशंस भी होते हैं, सो ऑन. ऑनरशिप क्रिएट कर ली हम लोगों ने 2 साल में एम्प्लॉइज़ की. अच्छा, इसके पे चैलेंज कहाँ आता है? जब इसको लिंक को रिवॉर्ड करते हैं ईयर एंड पे, जब आप इंक्रीमेंट इसके साथ लिंक करते हैं, तो वहाँ पे अगर आप बेल कर्व अप्लाई करते हैं, क्योंकि यूजुअली एक इशू आता है सबसे बड़ा कि जब उसके साथ इंक्रीमेंट लिंक होती है तो एक्सपेक्टेशंस बहुत हाई होती है. तो वो सारा का सारा मैकेनिज्म आप स्मार्ट केपीआईज़ को देखें, ओनरशिप सारी साइड पे रह जाती है. वही वाली बात है जैसे आपने की कि एम्प्लॉय खुद आके कहता है कि जी आप फिर रेट कर दें, जैसा भी करना है, क्योंकि उसका फोकस इज नॉट ऑन द ऑब्जेक्टिव साइड, दैट फोकस इज ऑन इंक्रीमेंट साइड. तो उसको बेल कर्व अप्लाई करें तो एचआर बुरा बनता है, और अगर बेल कर्व अप्लाई ना करें तो सारे हाई रेट हो जाते हैं. तो क्या इसका क्या हल हो सकता है कि इसको हम लोग कैसे इसको मैनेज कर सकते हैं?
कोई हल नहीं हो सकता. There is, one of the harshest realities of life is that not everybody is the same. And as much as we try to constantly kind of make sure that everybody is heading in the same direction, not everybody is heading in the same direction at the same pace. And therefore, the famous bell curve, right, is I think if there was a way around it to differentiate, I think we would have found it by now, right? And maybe there is something around the corner that will come and that will change this whole thing, and then we look back and we'll say, oh, how
communism.
Yeah, exactly. How silly was the bell curve? Maybe we'll say that 5 years from now. But today, where everything stands, and this was the first point I made, which is differentiation, which is what bell curve is. It's differentiating performance. Differentiation is hard, right? And accepting that differentiation is hard is the starting point. But the whole company has to accept it. right? Did you say you're from Interview? Yes. Okay. So I'm a big fan of Sir Saab. I know him very well, and you know that's a story, by the way, that people really need to learn. There's Interloop, right? So they're in, you know, out there in Faisalabad, there is this revolution happening with this brilliant company, and not enough stories are told about it, by the way. But anyway, that's a separate discussion. So I think it's fantastic that there is this reality that is emerging across the board. And आपको उसका जो आपने सवाल पूछा उसका जो मेरे पास short answer है वो ये है कि the pain that people will have to go through to accept that the world is not fair. There is differentiation. The world is not equal. Sometimes it can be fair, sometimes unfair, but it's not equal. Right? There is differentiation. You know, better people who do better, harder work, make fewer mistakes, right, are better at something, get ahead than others in the same thing. Right? It happens in sports, it happens in life, it happens in everything. Right? So, unfortunately, aista log ko, I think they'll get there. But these are tough things to say, right? Because you want to be also very inclusive and you want to make sure everybody's on the same page. But as a leader, if you don't say, I found that if you don't say these tough things, then you're again doing an absolute disservice, because then you're trying to tell people, nahi, sab saathi doenge, sabka performance, but it's not truth. It's not the truth at all. So that's just my point of view.
I'll just add to this, because when I was at Agro, it was the bell curve as well. But there are two elements to it, two parts to it. When you are part of the bell curve, people assume, you see, if you are ranked at the bottom 1/3, for example, let's say, what's the problem there? The bell curve has to have certain peripherals to it. So when I put my employee in bottom 1/3, my manager asked me what's the plan to pull him out of there next year as well. This is what the part of the manager job is. It doesn't mean if you are rated 1/3. I was rated bottom 1/3 because the business objective that year did not do well at all. So what was the other saving part was the leadership element. That how did you do? One is you get your two objectives, making it like sale or deliver this project. The other is how part. The how part is directly related to the company culture. We had 6 leadership elements where now being driven to 3: dynamic, productive, capable. So if this year's objective I have not been able to meet because of the external environment, my score is bottom 1/3. Absolutely nobody denies that. I also can't deny that. It does not mean that I'm going to be at that stage forever. My boss has to tell me, okay, fine, Wes, you did this, so this is the score, but we see that on that productivity, dynamic, capable, you did a lot of things. So next year when the results go, I can be in the top 1/3 as well. It's not that you are just going to be fixated there for the rest of your life. This is where the employees get so scared of that bell curve. That means that once and 1 year in a lifespan of a career span of 40 years, so this is the comfort level which we have to give to that employee, that guy. And remember, it's easier said than done. One who's been rated as bottom 1/3, he can just end up the world. 1 year, good guy, bad ho gaye. But then you have to, this is where you have to hold the hand. This is the system. Next time you do well, nothing stops you. We tell you how to do it. If a person is consistently coming there, then in our case we have a process called performance improvement plan. You just cannot fire the person, okay, fine, you just no. You say, okay, fine, these are the things. You sit up with the employees, say, what are the areas where you are struggling? Is it like communication? Is it like what? The numbers, what you need a different area, you need to work in a different function. So there are a lot of things around reward and performance that is covered by the culture part of the organization, but it has a direct impact on performance and reward management. So it all should be covered. And I think at Interloop it should not be a problem. It's a big, good, big company, progressive people, but it will take time. It just can't happen. 2 years is I would say you still will see some repercussion for another 2-3 years at least. Then you will be able to say, okay, fine, yes, we will implement it perfectly.
Do we have any more
Question over there?
We have one over there.
I'm conscious of our leader's time. We can take one more question.
No problem. As long as the people are not too hungry. The last thing you want to do is to stand have to be lunch with people, right? So,
Are we hungry for knowledge and experience? And sure, I think we can take one question.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Samreen Yusuf and I work as a recruiter at Shell. So we know that performance management is linked to rewards, and rewards, be it in the form of increments or bonus, is a highly effective mechanism through which you can encourage employees to perform better and also exhibit the sort of behaviors that is required in a certain organization according to its values, etc. Right? My first question actually was that globally, people are moving away from the bell curve, and even in Pakistan, I do believe there are certain companies that have moved away from it. So my first question was actually pertaining to what your views are on the bell curve, which I believe have already been answered. But secondly, my question is that if not rewards, if not bonus and increments, what are the other ways in which we can encourage employees to perform better, to behave according to the competencies that are required?
I think the reward and the bell curve, all that stuff, it is actually at the end of the day, everybody works for the bottom line. Right? That is a given thing. You can compromise up to a certain extent of that 10-15% if you even get a better place. But then the culture part comes in, the company culture part is how you deal with the problem, how you deal with the employees, what are the benefits around it. That certainly helps. But again, now with the changing environment, I think what we probably might see happening also, the question is, the variable pay should be more, fixed pay should be less, so that you strive more for the results that you get. But that also drives the measurement of that, it would still be the bell curve, but it gives a bit of a problem. We have seen, I have seen in my last, let's say like 20, 25 years, 30 years of this, you need to, in Urdu mein kehte hain na ki aapko zyada bade barabar nahi karte. You need to separate the two. I've seen in a lot of companies where the difference between the stars, the performers and the workhorses is like significant for each of them to be in those categories. But it has to be driven again at the end of the day, the bottom line, honestly. The rest is all culture. How do you come there? It will still come back to the bell curve. That, as someone said, if there would have been any other mechanism, it would have been introduced in the world by now, but probably we are not seeing anything. So probably that would be, I think, the best alternative so far.
I think to your question of what else can we do beyond the reward and kind of the financial reward, etc. So I think indeed majority of people, the financial side matters a lot. It's the reality. That's again one of the things how life works. But for sure, also a vast majority of people, beyond just the financial side and perhaps career growth also, which is also critical, is if you're not having fun at work, right, you will find that very quickly people, the financial side starts becoming, it's there, but fine, you start taking it for granted a little bit, etc. And the other kind of unhappiness starts to build in. So I think it's a very good question, which is, and I think HR as a function needs to, just take a couple of steps beyond just that whole management of the system side, which is, when people come to work and when people leave work, do they leave in a generally, I don't know, happiness is probably too, higher order state to be in, but do they leave in a positive state of mind, right? About, or look forward, absolutely, or look forward to coming the next day. And I think that takes a lot more than just the financial side, right? And I think that focus is sometimes there, sometimes it comes in waves in companies. So there will be an initiative and then everybody will start dressing up the office as a fun place, and then 6 months later we're back to the same thing. So I think that probably needs to be a bit more of a constant element. I think that will help. And then the rest is also culture part that was being mentioned. And then that has a whole sphere, a big world to it. So I'll give you the short answer, but I think there needs to be more there for sure.
I can just add a couple of thoughts. We talked about bonus and stuff. I think one of the big challenges, and I think we've been talking about this whole while, is the extent of reward differentiation. So you will see there are some progressive companies who are ruthless about performance differentiation, right? And to someone's point previously, it's about being fair as well. You've got a star. What are you doing to motivate them? That's the first point. The other highly underutilized point around, what else can we do, is the whole concept of monetary and non-monetary recognition. There are some fantastic platforms, and research has shown actually non-monetary recognitions done regularly at the right time, either in private or in public, has a huge impact on employee motivation and engagement. So, and recognition doesn't have to wait, like I said, once a year. Again, there are so many programs. You can do it annually, functionally. Like I said, you made my day. We have a program which I think is really nice. Somebody does something nice to you, just send them a card. These are small things, but they have a huge impact.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Do we have any more questions? Fine. Are there any more questions from the audience?
Okay, if there are no questions, I want to make just one point. I think one of the questions I was thinking we didn't get, but we'll address it anyway, is this whole, gender diversity discussion. Now, I think you asked it in one sense, but I think there's a bigger discussion to it, and I wanted to make a point about it, which is, and there are two thoughts on this that I wanted to leave you with, and maybe that will help as we go forward. I think one is, we had this Women's Day event in our company, and dressed up the office, and we had some nice guest speakers, etc. And then I was asked to speak, and my honest, very transparent point of view on this was that I'm in no position to speak, because I'll tell you, as a man in this country, right? And that's my unfiltered point of view. So maybe maybe it's good or bad, but you have, I think, no idea, right, what happens on the other, side of the gender challenges that people have to go through, and it starts everywhere, right? So, and this is again just my personal point of view, so please, ignore it if you don't like it. The challenges for women in our country start first exactly from home, right? So first you have to fight the patriarchal systems, the family, etc. And then you break through all those barriers, then women get married, then the husband starts to kick into, and then the in-laws. So if somehow people have made it through all of those barriers and made it to the workplace, right? Then the workplace, nonsense starts kicking in, right? And I was making a point on that day when we had this event that, small things, right? Like men get up, put whatever clothes on, right, and come to work, right? Women probably in our country have to think 1,000 times, right? Because is it, is somebody going to judge, is somebody not going to judge, etc. So there is a reality which is it's a very, very different context to the classical, tick the box on gender diversity in our country, right? There is a huge amount of baggage and context that you have to keep in mind, right, when you're looking at this issue. And therefore, and please use this if you want, or etc. At least we try to do it at our place, which is the onus of making women comfortable to be who they are at the workplace is on the men, right? That this has to be the criteria, right? This has to be the assessment. This has to be the KPI. This has to be what we ask, right? And if we set that as kind of the benchmark, right? Then we will start, I think, seeing some real progress, right? So we tried. I'm not sure. I don't think we're there yet. By the way, a long way. But I think we're going to keep trying, at least in our organization, which is, women who come to work should be able to be themselves as they are at home, as they are with their families, as they are with their friends, right? That's a kind of an almost intellectual KPI that you need to set, and the responsibility of ensuring that happens is on the men in the company, right? So that's one very big point I want to make. Having said that, though, the issue is that we also can't kind of broad stroke this. And let me give you an example, right? So if you, and I was making the earlier point, if you remove a lot of things from the middle and put results as the only thing we are looking at, then if a female employee fails to deliver, right, you have to be just as gender neutral in that assessment as you would be, while all the other things I was saying, right? So I think that they are two different things, but they have to come together. And if we do that well, I think we'll start seeing some really good results, because what happens a lot is maybe you do the first part very well, but in the second part, then you're a little bit like, okay, nobody wants to disturb the score and the percentages and etc. Right? It used to happen to us at Procter & Gamble, right? I had a target and I was always like, okay, what do I do about this gender target, right? Now, that is also not okay, right? Because if you don't deliver, it doesn't matter, black, white, red, blue, man, woman, it doesn't matter. You have to be completely colorblind and gender neutral, right, in your assessment. So I think it's not linked to perhaps any of the questions, but performance management as a topic is, I think these two things have to start coming in combined, and I think we'll start to see some tremendous progress in this country, and I think more of us, obviously need to champion it and own it, and we're trying at our end, and we keep talking to people about it as well. So I wanted to make that uniform.
Thank you, Natal, for the end of the session. Thank you, and of course, for the insights and time. We'll break for lunch. We'll see you back in 45 minutes. Thank you so much.